both yourself and like Dr. Hooker have actually encountered these like retractions, and I'm curious if either of you can speak to just the kind of impact that'll have on one's psyche, and Dr. Lyons-Weiler as well, just in terms of how your approach to future publishing, what is the impact that's going to have on a young scientist somewhere who's made a discovery, and potentially it's an inconvenient evidence. How do they marshal the kind of support they really need to go ahead and publish that?
I'm a compulsive rule follower, and I've had to really break out of that mold. Being a health freedom activist at this particular point in my career, as well as a scientist, I break a lot of rules now. So, but there are a lot of societal rules. So, but when the paper that was retracted, when I received notification that it had been taken down off the journal's website, I was devastated. I was the type of kid, I never had detention in high school. Are you kidding? I was probably the one that was like making them clean the erasers when they had detention in high school. But it took me literally 4 years to go back and encounter that information and republish that data. And I published it in 2018 in the Journal of American Physicians and Surgeons. I did not find a PubMed indexed journal that would take it, but instead of the actual story about the CDC whistleblower being in the news, which, there were some outlets that were willing to carry it. Now the story became, there's a scientist, Brian Hooker, and he published this information showing that there was a greater likelihood of having autism diagnosis in African American males that got the MMR on time. Now the story was the journal actually retracted that paper, so there's nothing to see here. So it became a non-story. But people really, really enjoyed reporting the non-story. So it was picked up by CNN. It was picked up by ABC News. I think at some point it floated around The Guardian. But it became a very, very popular story to the point where, after a while I thought my first name is debunked, because whenever I read about myself in the news, it's debunked scientist Dr. Brian Hooker. It was indeed punitive, and fortunately it didn't have the effect that I think that they wanted it to have, but it definitely hurts. I mean, there are a lot of things I've endured in my career. That's probably one of the biggest ones.
I think we should change the rules so that the number of retractions that you have from unethical journals actually is a positive, and we can go head to head, right? And we can boast and say, I'm more likely to fund this person because this unethical journal. So I also had a paper retracted with Paul Thomas. It was a study of 3,300 kids over 10 years. We found 561 unvaccinated kids in the data. None of them had ADHD, 0. Same thing was found in the Henry Ford study. In the best of all possible worlds, the Henry Ford study would have validated the Lyons-Weiler and Thomas study, and then all of medicine would say, hey, is that what you're seeing? And then they would replicate it. That's why they have to kill these papers so that nobody goes, hey, I'm kind of seeing the same thing. It's that siloization and keeping people apart and keeping them in the dark and keeping them separate, which, if you think about it, is really censorship and a violation of the First Amendment. And if there's any federal government involvement in censorship through these journals, that's a crime. And I know there's some press that wanted to talk to me about the notices these journals have received. So those criminals have to be found through discovery by the Attorney General's office, and more power to them. I hope that they get each and every last one of them.
It is a challenge too, because anybody can complain to a journal, anybody can complain to a university, and they are obligated to respond. That's part of their job, but we're not allowed to see who and what their conflicts of interest might be. So I'm looking forward to the discovery to find out which groups or individuals are submitting such complaints. I think I'm a big fan of transparency all the way around. I like data being made available as part of studies. I like reviews being made available. I like if something like this happens, then there should be a very clear path, and people should stand up, should be required to stand up and tell us who they are if they are complaining.